Welcome to Make Your Mark Live. My name is Mark Moyer, and I'm super excited to have Mitch Harris on board today. He hails from the amazing state of Georgia right now. Say hello, Mitch.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mark. I appreciate it.
Hey, look, definitely my pleasure. And what really drew me to you in the first place, really to talk on this platform and within the Win Again Academy, is the fact that yes, you're a financial advisor. Yes, you help all kinds of people and athletes with all their financial matters and really giving them the best guidance possible. But you bring to the table an incredible story that really nobody else can share, specifically anyway. And so we'll get into that in a minute. But what I'd love to do, Mitch, is really sort of rewind the tape a little bit. And I know that you grew up, you're born in Florida, and you've always been from the South, and you've lived most of your life in Georgia. But what was it that compelled you, going back a ways, to join the Navy?
Well, it's funny because I get that question a lot, but to be honest, I didn't know much about the military at all growing up. What I knew about the military was that my two grandfathers were in World War II. One was in the Navy, one was in the Army, and it was something that we all knew but wasn't really talked about because one was in Battle of the Bulge and one was in Battle of Midway. So they saw some things that they didn't really care to bring back up.
Right.
And it wasn't until I was in the Naval Academy that we actually got stories from them, which I'll cherish obviously for a long time. But for me, it was to kind of get into how that even came about. I was just an average athlete in high school, and I had was throwing a bullpen one day at the baseball field, and the head baseball coach was the assistant football coach. And so one day a guy came by the field, had on all this really cool Navy gear, happened to be a defensive coordinator for the Navy football team at the time, to recruit the football players. Came by the baseball field to pick up the assistant coach to walk over to practice. Started asking questions about, hey, who's this tall, lanky kid? What's his story? What's the background? He actually played baseball in North Carolina, where I went to high school, in that area. And so he knew kind of what he was looking at. And so long story short, he called back to the academy and told the baseball coaches, hey, I think I've got a guy that you might want to just check out. And so a week or so later, we went on a visit to the academy, and from there we fell in love. And so that was my introduction to the Naval Academy.
That's interesting. So up until that time, you were thinking, oh, I'm going to go to University of wherever, or Georgia, or somewhere, right?
Yeah, matter of fact, it was kind of like it was either going to be kind of a smaller Division I for baseball. We looked at like a Gardner Webb. We looked at Elon. We looked at some other schools kind of in and around that area, and that's kind of what I was thinking that was going to be, and then this happened. So it was a little bit of a change.
I'll say. And so your first day at the academy, I mean, you walk in. What were you? Did you know what to expect, or was it a whole, like, what was it like?
The first day of the Naval Academy is called Induction Day, or I Day, as they call it. And you show up a little over a month before school starts. And, everyone's in, your T-shirt, shorts, college shirt, whatever you come in.
Yeah.
And you've got one duffel bag of clothes that they kind of tell you, hey, bring some essential stuff here and there.
Sure.
So you walk in the door, and there's a table of people in uniform checking you in. Hey, what's your name? Here's this, and so and so. Then they say, hey, don't forget this number. This is your number. Your number is 082850. Don't forget it. That's your number. And so from that, you're kind of like, okay, whatever. And they hand you a couple things, one being Reef Points. Reef Points is our little manual, if you will. Had all kinds of things we had to learn, but basically they said, here's this, start reading. Please line up over there. So you start to line up, and you're starting to kind of feel it a little bit of understanding, like, what are we about? Like, I know we have to like register and get all this other stuff, but what's this about to look like? Sure enough, by the end of that day, I had no hair. I had completely been shaved bald. At any point, that I was standing around. I had to have reef points at a 90-degree angle in front of my face at just a few inches reading. And the only things I was allowed to say was yes, sir, no, sir, and I'll find out, sir. That was basically how I communicated. And I was known by my last name, that number, and plebe, and that's what you're called. So your first day was definitely an eye-opening experience. Something looking back on that I'll definitely cherish, to just kind of laugh, to understand that I had no idea what I was getting into, but it was a really cool day.
So then at what point did they, I mean, when do you start playing baseball there? When did that kick in? Or, a week later you get, you have your mitt out and you start playing catch with somebody, or how'd that play out?
Yeah. So during plebe summer, there's not, there's no baseball practice or anything like that. Matter of fact, I came in at about 220 pounds as a senior. And I was there for about a month before school starts. And by the time school started, I was 195.
Wow.
And so school starts, and about that time, you have your activity hours where you could go to the baseball field, or football players would go to the football field. You do a workout, you do something, but it's not official practice. It's just kind of, you go out and some of the assistants would be there, kind of just not running a practice, but allowing you to take ground balls or hit in a cage or whatever. If you weren't on a team, you would go and play flag football, or you had to have, it was mandatory. Everyone did basically a sports hour, just to kind of get you out of exercise. But once school started, then we were allowed to have, practices depending on when whenever your season was. So it wasn't until the school year where things really started to pick up. And then losing 20 pounds, while also didn't really help out. So having to figure out how to lift properly, how to make sure my legs were up under me after all the running we had done and were doing my plebe year. And so it was a very eye-opening year one to understand how to balance both life within the Navy and the Naval Academy, as well as baseball.
So as you're progressing through the Naval Academy and you're in year 2 and year 3 and so forth, at what point are you thinking, I've got a real shot at maybe playing professionally someday, versus shut up, I'm a Navy officer, I got to focus on serving my country, and I mean, was there conflict there? Or did you just simply say, I'm tabling the baseball dream until my commitment's over?
Yeah, I think being transparent and honest from the get-go. My thing was, I didn't really understand what I had committed to. I had no idea. I had nobody in my family that was immediate family that was military. I knew that as a family that was, we never missed a meal. We didn't do this, but we also weren't, we weren't well off. My dad worked at a church. My mom was a CPA, and so I looked at it as, man, I got a full ride to a university that I never thought I had an opportunity to go to. I'd be dumb to not do that. It wasn't until about year 2 that I fully understood what that commitment meant, and the pride then came in to say, wow, what an honor to be able to go to this academy. What an honor to make that commitment, to say, man, not only am I going to give time and service, but I'm willing to give my life for others to make sure that this country maintains its freedom. And so as we kind of develop and understand the things that we were taught and the lessons that we go through, and an example I give is every night when we're about to go to our rooms as plebes, we would do 2 things. We read a Medal of Honor citation and sang Blue and Gold. Blue and Gold was obviously our song. And every night when we ran through and walked through those citations, it gave you a sense of these are the people that walk the same halls that you're in. And these are the people who aren't here today, but will be remembered forever because of the things that were instilled in them while they were here. And so that's what sunk in, that really right off the bat, you start to understand that there's a whole lot more to this than just school, Navy, and baseball. There's a lot bigger things to focus in on. And so I say all that because it wasn't until year 2 and probably even into year 3 where I really understood that, man, this is something I'm so proud of and want to do. But then mentally you have that dream, so that there's that battle. Now there's that conflict of, but I've also been taught, strive for your dreams, strive for your goals, chase after the things that you've set. And so now I've got these two things battling of understanding, well, how do I do it? How do I do it the right way? Because my junior year, going into my junior year, was when I think I realized the possibilities that I had. I had a really good sophomore year, and going into the fall of, going into the spring of my junior year, when we had some scouts show up, that's what really was like, this is serious. This is actually something that's a possibility.
But you obviously graduated and honored your commitment, and you served. While you were serving, was there, and we'll talk about your service in a minute, but I'm just curious, did you have the opportunity to continue playing much while you were serving, or was it just tough to, when you're on a boat, I'm sure it's pretty challenging to, I guess you can throw 60 feet, but I don't know about throwing 200 feet.
That was challenging, especially when it's moving.
Yeah.
That throws challenges in and of itself. But yeah, so I got drafted my junior year. Basically said, hey, can't do it unless you just make an offer that my family and the Navy would say that's ridiculous to not do. Right. Then got drafted senior year, and we knew there was kind of a delay. We wasn't sure. We didn't really know what that was going to look like. But it will sign the contract and then go into active duty. And so while I was on these ships, my first ship was USS Ponce out of Norfolk. Did 2 deployments on it, but it had a larger flight deck. And so we could land up to 4 helicopters on the back of that ship. And so, quite frankly, I could long toss on that ship. And so I found out that one of the cooks on board was from the Dominican. And so if you know anything about baseball, you know that if you're Dominican, you know baseball. Sure. And so when I found out he was from Dominican, I immediately went up to him and just said, hey, I want to continue to throw. I have a possibility of playing. Would you like to throw, whenever you can? He had this huge smile on his face, like, absolutely. And so any opportunity we had, we'd go on the flight deck and throw. My dad sent out bags of baseballs for us to throw with, because if you miss it, you're not getting it back. That's true. And if it hits the flight deck is so rough. The flight deck would literally, the flight deck, if you're not careful, if you wore the same shoes on the flight deck all the time, the soles would literally be eaten away. That's how rough the flight deck is to help with the landings. Right. So if the ball hit the flight deck, you might as well throw that off to the side too. So it was great. I threw, but I told myself while I was on deployment, while I was out, that if I could just maintain and keep in the best shape that I could, that I knew that whenever I had the opportunity, I could really push to get my arm into shape and not have to worry about my body breaking down. And so I told myself, if you can just make sure that you're staying in the best possible shape, physically, mentally, everything, when you get that chance, and there's probably at some point going to be a chance, when you get that chance, you got to be ready, because you're only probably getting one.
Perfect. So you mentioned you deployed a couple of times out of Norfolk, and then you also you switched ships, and you also spent some time in good old Russia and also South America. Oh, yeah. But and I know we could spend this whole entire time slot talking about some of your experiences with the Navy, but I guess I want to shift more towards, and we can definitely save those for another time, but I want to talk a little bit about the transition from the Navy and into baseball. And what was there a point while you were still serving where you were actually thinking, okay, I need to prepare my mind for my day after, the next day? Or was it sort of kind of like, I don't have time to think of that because I'm so focused on my service?
It wasn't until the last probably 6 to 8 months, when I was on shore duty. The command that I was at, we found that was being transitioned from active duty to a reserve duty role. And so I was able to have a lot of free time during that last command. My chain of command knew what I was wanting to do. I always informed my chain of command, let them know, hey, here's my end goal. Here's what I want to do. So they were very supportive. They understood that if there was nothing going on that afternoon, I needed to go do this, that, and the other, hey, let's be flexible and do that. So I was able to throw and work out and things of that nature during my last command. Again, about the last 6 to 8 months or so of my active duty time. And so that's probably the time where I started telling myself, let's start thinking about what that looks like, and let's start kind of getting prepared for really the unknown. I don't know what this looks like. I know I'm going to be 5+ years older than, that next guy that's really in the same spot that I'm about to be in. And so that was really what I was telling myself was, okay, mentally, what's this going to be like? Physically, I wasn't worried about it. I was a little nervous about my arm, trying to figure out, hey, I haven't thrown to a hitter. I haven't been in a game situation.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to just trust that that's going to come. But in terms of thinking about it, yeah, I think the last probably 6 to 8 months or so, I was really focused on what was next.
Now, what team, who drafted you initially?
So the Braves drafted me my junior year.
Okay.
And then the Cardinals obviously drafted me my senior year.
Got it. So is that how it works though? Is that if you don't sign, you go back in the pool, right? And then kind of
Yeah,
happens along.
so back in 2008, it was basically you sign. If you get drafted, you have a full year basically until the next draft to sign or not. And if you don't sign, then you're eligible for the following draft, and that's what happened. So they signed me. The Braves, quote unquote, owned the rights to me for that whole next year in case something happened.
Right.
And then come into 2008. The Cardinals drafted me that year, and then obviously I signed.
That's great. So you walk out, you're done with the Navy, at least active duty, and you pretty much just stroll right into camp. Or what was it? I mean, tell me a little bit about that sort of adjustment from military to civilian life, and then you weren't even doing almost regular civilian life. I mean, now we're talking about switching to a sport and playing it professionally.
Yeah, so to back up just a hair, basically, I had asked the Navy a few times. I said, I want to do both. I want to play and represent the Navy all in the same. It obviously didn't work out that way. But what we did do was I did stay in the reserves. Everybody that comes out of the academy typically has to stay in the reserves and a certain amount of time. Because baseball starts early in the year, spring training starts in February. I was supposed to be getting out of active duty in May. Again, that command I was at was being transitioned. I said, hey, is there any chance I could go in January or February to spring training so I don't miss another spring training? This will be 5 years after I was drafted.
Right.
So they let me out a few months early to go down to spring training that year, my last year on active duty. And then we extended my reserve time. So long story short, went down there in January, basically packed up everything I had in Virginia Beach and drove down to Florida several weeks early. Got everything situated, basically moved in with a really close friend of mine's parents who lived in Boca, and drove up to the field in Jupiter, which was about a 45-minute drive every day. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to be able to get up there, do my own thing, and be there as long as I needed to be to ensure that I got in the work that I could. And so I knew that the one question mark was going to be my arm. And so getting there early and going up to the field as often as I could definitely was a help. But it still didn't go as well as I wanted to the first year or two.
Well, when you say that, what was your expectation?
I don't know. I think the tough part is, as any competitor, you think that it's going to come back, like that. And, knowing that in college I was, on average, 92, 93, touch 4 or 5 off the mound as a starter, I thought there's no reason I shouldn't be able to do that, soon. Long story short, when I got into spring training, I was max effort about 82, 83. And
Oh,
so that was a little disheartening, embarrassing, trying to figure out, like, why am I even here? They
right.
drafted me 5 years ago. Do I even have a shot at this? And so that was probably where it really started to sink in that, well, you're going to have to really work. You're going to have to work harder than you've ever had to before, and really take some things that you've learned over the last 9, 10 years, and really take all that together to figure out how you're going to accomplish this thing, or it's going to pass by you before you can blink.
So did you end up
So
finding out that it was a more of a mechanical thing, or was it a physical thing? What was it what was the adjustments that really brought you back?
no, I think talking to Brent Strom was the who's now the
Yeah,
Astros pitching coach. He was the minor league pitching coach
yeah,
at the time, and so his theory was it's in there. We've just got to get it back out. It hasn't been out in a long time. We got to dust the cobwebs off and just get it back out. We did literally everything you can think of in terms of drills, in terms of stretching. I mean, literally, I tried everything. And so I think it was more of mechanics and or just kind of muscle atrophy in terms of just trying to make sure that you have to get back into the form of, I haven't done this. I haven't done this in a long time. How do I get back to muscle memory, having the muscles really react like you want them to? So yeah, I think it was more mechanical, but definitely played into the mental side of things.
maybe you just needed to get your fellow Dominican, the guy you're
Yeah,
playing catch with, back playing
exactly,
catch with you again. So,
exactly.
so skipping ahead a little bit, because you pitched in the minor leagues a couple of years, and so I mean, I feel like you got the mojo back a little bit, and then 2015 rolls around, and you're with the big squad. You get called up mid-April, and then you finally get the call from the bullpen. Tell me about that experience of when you first walked in. I mean, when your first inning in the majors. What was that?
It's
Do
a
you remember that?
blur.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
it's it's a blur. Obviously, I remember that like it was last week.
yeah.
But in the moment, from the time that gate swung open and I ran in Milwaukee from the left field fence, I could kind of hear, the crowd and the people, but the mentality piece of, and I've talked about this a lot with people, is I think because of all the training I had up until that point, I was not nervous in terms of my heart racing. Oh my goodness, I'm in the big leagues. Can I do this? I think I was mentally more prepared than I even realized, because as I ran in, got to the mound, found the catcher, it was just me and him, and I think that's what really helped. And it wasn't really until after the first at bat that I kind of was like, I'm pitching in the big leagues, and it took a little bit to realize, like, hey, step back for a second and see what's going on here.
Yeah.
But I really give the Naval Academy and the things that I did up until that point all the credit for instilling those things in me that really helped to blur out some of the distractions that would have made me extremely nervous.
So for all of you watching right now, Mitch, I'll let you sort of embellish on this a little bit, but sounds like there weren't too many guys that graduated from the Naval Academy that you pitched in the majors.
No, so I had to do the research on this
Yeah.
because after the game, we had people asking, well, were you the first and this, and so obviously you had the baseball historians who came and were telling me, do you know the guy Nemo Gaines? And I was like, I've never heard of him, but it sounds like a great guy. He said, but he basically was the last guy to pitch in the big leagues who came out of the Naval Academy. That was back in 1921, and he graduated from Naval Academy and then went directly to play for the Washington Senators at the
Hmm.
time. and then pitched in a handful of games, and then went on to active duty following that. And
Oh,
so,
interesting. Oh, I see.
so that
Yeah,
was the first person to ever do it. And then, I take pride in saying mine was flipped. I did active duty first, and then
sure.
went and
Of
played. So
course. And that's, I'm assuming that's a tad bit more challenging. So, so now you're in the bigs for a little while, and then there's some shuttling around here and there, but you continued to play and you continued to have that dream of being a successful major league pitcher. But as happens fairly often in this sport, there's an injury. Tell me about sort of how that first happened, and what was going through your mind, and what was some of the reality that ended up falling in.
yeah, I think once I got to the big leagues and had some success and felt comfortable there, as that season kind of progressed, I started thinking, man, what a career this is going to be. And I just want to be able to stay here. I just want to be able to have a several years here in the big leagues to say that, man, we did that.
Yeah.
Because everybody wants, a long career. I knew I was behind the eight ball in terms of the likelihood of being able to stay for a long time, being I was a 27-year-old rookie, or, 29-year-old rookie when I actually got to the big leagues.
Yeah.
So it was, I knew it was far fetched to stay for a while, but I thought, man, wouldn't it be great just to have 3, 4, 5 years in the big leagues? Man, that'd be amazing. At the end of 2015, as I started feeling some soreness in my forearm and figuring that, this is the first year I've ever pitched in the big leagues and had a full season under my belt. That's probably what everybody feels.
Mm,
Coming into spring training the next year, I still felt it. Was not necessarily worried, but started thinking, man, what if this is something a little more serious?
right.
Come to find out, it took a while to figure it out. But long story short, unlike most where basically the UCL tears in half, my UCL had simply just peeled off the bone and was just sitting there. So it was hard for them to see because it was still on the bone, but it just was not attached. So we had the surgery, and so I thought Dr. Andrews put it really well. He said, Mitch, if I ask a sprinter to just sit down for a little bit and then I have them get up and sprint, they're probably going to tear something. They're probably going to pull something. He said, that's what happened with you. You didn't play for 5 years. You got up and moved up really quickly and, accelerated very fast. And you just hurt something. So then it was kind of the creeping in of trying to figure out, okay, well, does this mean am I done? Or does this mean like, hey, I'm going to actually feel better from this now that I've had the surgery? I've seen guys come back from this and throw harder. What's that look like?
Right.
And that was when the mental part really came into play of understanding I've got another battle to face here.
Well, so you're going through that battle, and we've got a question from one of our participants here, and they want to know, can you please speak about the resiliency and the discipline and how you approach times of adversity? Because maybe talk about your surgery and the recovery and how you remained focused on trying to achieve, continue in baseball after Navy, and was there, what was that point at which, also I'll continue on, that you sort of said, well, you know what, I probably need to turn the switch off?
Yeah, I think, I've always been a visionary type of person, meaning that what I want to have done or what I want to accomplish is something that I think about regularly. And sometimes they seem extremely far-fetched. Example, when I'm in the Naval Academy telling people, hey, one day I would like to pitch in the big leagues, it seems far-fetched. It's never happened after the fact, so maybe that's cool to get drafted, but make it to the big leagues is probably a little far-fetched. Then it was, okay, well, hey, I'd like to really get back on the field after having a surgery, not pitching for 5 years at the age of 30, and get back to the big leagues. But my thing was, in terms of resiliency, was always telling myself, no matter what others may or may not think, that if I believed it, then it's a possibility. And if I told myself that I can do this, then no one else can tell me that I can't. And so even if I fall short of that goal, I can take pride in whatever level that I got to. For instance, I succeeded in getting to the big leagues, but I didn't succeed in having a 3, 4, 5 year career.
Right,
I
right.
did not succeed in getting back on the field after the surgery. But then what I told myself was, man, look what I did accomplish. Look what I did accomplish up to this point, because a lot of people can't say that they did X, Y, and Z. And so I was able to kind of take the positives from that. So my thing on resiliency is always to set the bar to your level and no one else's. And then when you do reach it, that's great. And if you don't, always turn back and look at what you did accomplish and take the win from there.
So you have your surgery, and Dr. Andrews performed it, huh?
He did not. So
Oh, okay.
actually, to just a quick caveat,
Sure, sure.
he looked at it, and basically there was two options: either to do Tommy John, or at the time there's a new surgery where they do a repair as opposed to a replace. Replace would be the Tommy John.
Yeah, got it.
He said to me, Mitch, this is a new surgery. If I do a repair, there's a very short recovery time compared to Tommy John. If I do this surgery, you'd be the first big league pitcher to have this surgery. I don't want to do it, he said, because if I did, everybody and their mother's going to call me, and I don't think that's the safest thing to do. You're kind of an exception. Because my arm did not have the wear and tear that others did.
Interesting. Yeah.
But he believed it could have been successful because of how well my UCL was, how good of a shape my UCL was. But he said it doesn't matter. What people realize is that I'm going to be able to do the surgery, and they're going to call and ask me to do that surgery. So he had Dr. Paletta in St. Louis do it.
Got it. So you have the surgery done, and you know that there's rehab time. At that time, were you still focused on getting back in the game, or were you starting to think, maybe I need to look at other options, or, what was your thought process then?
No, I'm going to steal something that Coach told me. I always had a plan A until I had to have a plan B. So for me, I think that too many times we have a plan A, plan B, and plan C, and we lose track of plan A because we're focused on plan B and plan C. And so what I told myself was, if there is a plan B, when it has to become an issue, it will. But until then, it's plan A. So plan A was, I'm going to be successful in this recovery. I'm going to make it back to the big leagues, and we're going to succeed at what I just said I'm going to do. That's plan A. Until it got to the realization that, hey, things aren't going the way that we had planned, or you're just not recovering as quickly as possible. Then we can think about plan B, maybe not even act on plan B, but you can at least start to change the mentality of, what does plan B look like? So for me, I didn't go after plan B. I didn't go look for jobs. I didn't do any of that. For plan B for me during that time, as I started to realize I'm not making the progress towards the end of this throwing program that I really want to, or that the doctors thought would be happening at this point. What may I do next? What can I think about to start getting my mindset in the framework of, if this is over, what does plan B look like? And that's kind of how I looked at it. And then when it's over, when the day came where the Cardinals said, hey, we really appreciate what you've done, but we don't have a spot for you anymore. Now it's plan B. And that's when I said, okay, we've already thought about this. This day has come. What does plan B actually look like now? And when you have that drastic of a transition, and I've talked to people about this too within the military, when your day is over, you get that DD 214, you walk out, there's now a plan B. There is something that you're going to have to do next. And I always have said, you have to take some time first to look back on your successes, look back on your wins, to then focus on what's next. And so that's what we did. My wife and I took some time, went back home, relaxed for a little bit, and just kind of prayed about what we wanted to do next. As I kind of got more into that, I realized, as I thought back, man, there's a big void in financial freedom, financial understanding, financial literacy within baseball, and not only just baseball, but pro sports. And that's kind of what started the process of me really doing the research and understanding what I wanted to do next.
Oh, that's great. So what's interesting, and you brought up a really almost like fell into my trap a little bit, but I've found that virtually all the athletes that I speak to and that I coach and I help, they have the same mentality. They say, look, I'm being paid by the Cardinals, by the DNF, NFL team, whoever it is, to perform on the field, on the rink, on the court, on the whatever it is, there's no room for a plan B. It's plan A all the way. And one thing I try to say is, no one's like, I wouldn't say to somebody, look, it's important that you have a plan B when plan A fails, because your mentality is, you ain't failing. Now, every athlete knows there's a 100% chance of retirement. It's happening,
Correct.
right? But instead of having a plan A and a plan B, I almost say, look, let's have a plan. There's no plan A, but instead just develop a secondary interest, develop something else that you love doing that's kind of cool, that may be out here. So in your case, it may have been in the off season taking just a simple, like an online class on financial stuff, or just doing something that kind of scratches that itch a little bit that you may have. Because one thing that I've found is that when you have something else that's kicking around in another part of your brain, it kickstarts the part of your brain even more that's a competitor. You're gonna perform better on the field if you're more well-rounded mentally. And it goes with the physical thing too. So one of the things that I try my best to do is really, for current athletes, to don't treat your interest in photography or fashion or finance or whatever is law as a plan B. Treat it as a secondary interest that you love
Correct.
doing, you enjoy doing, because then you can turn it into that plan B, which ends up becoming plan A when plan A is done. So, but that's a really great point. So tell me now, shifting gears a little bit, but you said you guys, between your wife and yourself, you spent some time really thinking about it, but you noticed that there was really a demand or a need for more financial, we'll call it literacy, that's the term everyone's using now, but understanding of basic finance stuff in sports, and especially in baseball and so forth. But is that what drove you to then, I mean, how did you even get started in this path that you're on now?
I think I saw it not only myself, but in my teammates of things that I did that I thought, well, that's crazy. Why'd I do that?
Right.
Or seeing guys that I knew had a longer career, 4, 5, 6 years, and then spending money like they're going to be there for another 4 or 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so for me, it was kind of like, man, I just don't understand, why they don't really understand that there's 25, 30, 40 years, even sometimes after this, that you're going to have to, provide for your family.
Yeah.
And so just some small things like that kind of triggered the thought of, I wonder if I could look into this industry, because quite frankly, in the sports industry, I believe, just from what I observed and what I heard people talk about, there was kind of a black cloud in terms of financial advisors. And you hear of too many people getting burnt of, I had a guy, but I lost money, or I had a guy and, I didn't really make anything, but somehow he still got paid. And you see these things that I was like, that doesn't even sound right, let alone morally, ethical, whatever, however you want to put that. So as I did more research, I realized that the industry is literally about a relationship. That's it. I said, so if I'm having a conversation with a guy and I say, hey, what is it that you and your family want to do? Because we know at some point, like you said, retirement is inevitable from your sport. You're going to have a day where someone says, I'm sorry, we don't need you anymore. That's going to happen. That's just how it works.
Right.
From that day forward, though, you and your family still want to do things. What does that look like? We're not talking plan B. We're not talking plan C. We're talking life. What does life look like after this? And if we can develop a plan to say, well, if that's what you want to do, let's talk about how we get there. Here's what it looks like from today, what you have today, and the possibilities of what could come. Here's what this would look like. And if we just develop a relationship of hey, I'm your biggest fan. I want you to do well. And I want you to trust me, know that I have the best interest for you and your family. That's what the industry should be all about. You should be a consultant to the family. You should be someone who's there to say, let me help you be fill in the blank. I mean, I take pride in our team of saying that when a client calls us, it doesn't have to be about finances. It's about that relationship to say, man, I want to talk about what's going on. This pandemic's been crazy. We've had some family stuff going on. Great, let's talk about it. Let me be a sounding board for you.
That's great.
and build that relationship, because quite frankly, the investment piece, the portfolios, the planning, all of that, to be honest, is the easiest part. It's really understanding what the person wants to do and the risk tolerance that they have, to understand that if I can accomplish what you said is important to you and your family, and we put together a plan for you that you're comfortable with, you're going to sleep better at night. And that's what it's about.
That's great. So, but flipping it around a little bit, in terms of a career as a financial advisor, um, you know, is that something that you think athletes would have a predilection towards because of their not just competitive nature, but their interest in sort of, I mean, look, when a coach says, learn this playbook or learn this, or here's how you
Yeah.
do this, athletes by nature have tremendous work ethic. They have they're incredible sponges when it comes to learning things that make them perform better. And in your opinion, is this a career path that you believe you'd recommend other athletes take?
I think so, if they have the right mindset in terms of the why. So again, for me, the why was I thought people were doing it the wrong way. I thought it was more me first, client second.
Yeah.
Where really, if you just do what's best for your client, you and your family will be taken care of. And so I think if they have the mentality of what you just said, the work ethic to say, if I can just bust it for this family, if I can make sure that they're doing what they need to accomplish what they told me they want to, it's a win-win. What other job do you get to sit across the table from someone? They tell you what their life goals are, and you literally get to help them accomplish that. I don't know of another job that does that also pays you for doing that. And that's the fun part about it, is we never get into a sales pitch. We never get into anything. It's, what is it we want to do? And let's figure out how we're going to get there. And then once we have that conversation, it's really, again, the relationship of, let's walk down that path of figuring out, what do you want to do? And let's go do that. So yes, I think any athlete that says, I want the competitive drive, because you've got that competitiveness to really have people understand whatever that thought of advisor, when you have that come up, that title, whatever that connotation is that you have, I want to make sure it's right. That's the competitiveness for me. And then it's the battle of man, I really want this person to be a client. I really want to help this family. I really want to go do this or that. That's the competitiveness piece for it. And then the work ethic piece comes into really making sure that they are able to accomplish what they're wanting to. So yes, I think it's something that athletes should definitely look into.
Super. So I've got a couple of questions from our audience. One of them is, talk to me a little bit about some of the mentors that you may have had, whether it's in the academy or in baseball or even as a financial advisor.
I've got many, to be honest with you, and they might not even know it. And so I think first and foremost, my dad is definitely someone that's very close to me. I had two younger sisters growing up, so my dad and I were are very close. So he instilled a lot of the things that I'm very proud of to this day of who I am. So anytime I had some issues of, struggling mentally or spiritually, whatever, I always went back to dad to say, hey, here's the things I'm going through. Let's have a real man-to-man conversation, be very transparent and talk about it. There's also, again, like I said, so many that I could probably go around and mention, but what I like to do, and to this day, I like to do is, if there's someone that said something that sparked an interest for me, that I always try to take as many tools as I can. One of the coaches told me one time, he said, Mitch, if you'll just keep a toolbox with you wherever you go and constantly put tools in it, at some point when you have a problem, you'll have enough tools to solve that problem. So what I've always done is, anytime I come around someone that I either admire or I want as a mentor, I always try to pick their brain to say, man, I've never thought of it that way, or man, I didn't even look at it like this, and take that tool from them and keep that for me. But like Mike Matheny, I think so highly of him. Just a not only a good manager, but an awesome person. There was several people in terms of the academy. My coach at the academy was one. I had again too many to list that I could call up at any moment to say, man, I'm thinking about this, that, or the other. Tell me what we talked about this before. Kind of talk me through, this thing that we mentioned, years back. And that's what's been beneficial to me.
That's great. So another question is, do you feel that you were drawn to the fiduciary responsibility associated with being with a financial career because, of your experience as a teammate in sports and in the military, or, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's one thing I was going to bring up earlier was I think a lot of athletes just naturally have a loyalty to them, right? I feel like they all have this loyalty piece where good or bad, they can't let go sometimes. And I think that's part of the clubhouse mentality. That's part of the team mentality that I think is so valuable because I just think you work better as a group and work better as a team. And so, yes, I think for me, one of the things that really drove me to this industry was the ability to work with people and say, hey, let's figure out the best way to accomplish said goal. And if we can figure that out, man, that's a win for everybody. And so I think that was the big piece for me is like, hey, we're going to work as a team. I'm always going to do what's in best interest of you because that's how we get success. And quite frankly, how this hasn't, not to get off the side, but how that hasn't been a must for all advisors doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't compute because if at the end of the day, that client brings in their money and says, hey, here's what I want to do. Here is what I have. They own that. That's theirs. And if they said, this is what I want to do, that's it. So it didn't really register to me how that wasn't what was being done. And I think that was what drew me into that and say, well, if that's the whole point, isn't it? That's why they're asking you to help. So for me,
you haven't met all of them, have you?
I haven't, and I don't really want to for some of them.
Well, what's interesting is that look, I think we're all gonna find, and especially on the other side of this virus stuff and everything else, that there is going to be a really increased spotlight on those who are providing the right service and they're doing the right thing. And I think it's a matter of time before they all are sort of looking at it from that standpoint. So that's good. Another question is, is there one piece of advice that you would say to your young self, whether it's about the athlete transition or the military transition?
Yeah, and actually it's two. It's something that I'll bring up almost every time I'm talking with someone, especially with the athletes. And because it was said to me by an athlete, and we kind of had a moment there where something just clicked. Long story short, he said to me, Mitch, I'm struggling because while I'm at the field, I'm at the stadium, if I'm out and about, I feel like Superman. I'm wearing the uniform. I'm just this Superman that just nothing can go wrong. Everybody wants my autograph. Everyone's yelling my name, this, that, and the other. He said, but when I leave the field and it's over and I can't do that anymore, I feel like Clark Kent. So I said, hold on a minute. So when you leave the field and you go home and the only people that are around you are the people who truly love you and want to be with you, you're giving them Clark Kent, and you're giving everybody else Superman. And we kind of looked at each other for a minute. And we're like, that's a little deep, but we kind of dove into that more. We said, hold on a minute. So we all have that Superman, that drive in us because we wouldn't have got to that level. So if we take that drive and that passion, that need for success, and now just trying to shift that to whatever it is that we're about to do next, you're setting yourself up for success. It's just, hey, how do I take that Superman that I know is in there, that I use to help me get to this certain level, and now we're going to take that to, all right, now I'm moving from the military to the corporate world to say, yes, I'm unfamiliar with this, but I'm going to take that drive, that passion, that need to succeed, and I'm going to now push that into this other direction and really kind of go on the path. So that's what really has helped as I've talked to some other people, because it happened with me. And the other thing was letting our scars show. And what I mean by that was a lot of times as athletes, as people who were in the spotlight, or people who had success, we didn't like to talk about failures. We like to cover up, but we pull our sleeve, but we don't like to show our scars. But a lot of times I think the bad part about doing that is other people don't get to see the failure and the healing and the things that actually have come from that because of those scars. And so I think a lot of times we have to be vulnerable to say, here's how I messed up. Here's how I did this incorrectly, but here's what I learned from it. And it's a constant reminder, because I really feel that like I hurt because this happened, but now I know that's a motivation piece for me to say, I won't make that mistake again. And oh, better yet, I'm going to take somebody else and say, here's what I did. Don't do what I did. And now you won't have the scar that I have, but you'll have the success.
Perfect. That's such a great way to sort of wrap things up here. Before we jump though, I need to make sure that we talk about this, Mitch. What's the best way for someone to be able to reach out to you?
Any way they feel the need. I mean, I've got, the social media stuff. I've got the LinkedIn. If you just go onto Google and type in my name, there's a website that you can see. And so any way that someone feels like they want to connect, I'm pretty good at, or I try to be pretty good at staying active on social media. And so give me about a day or so to get back to you. But I will make sure that I reach out to everybody.
Now, Mitch, just a news flash, you're not the only Mitch Harris on the planet. So do you have what are your handles? What's your...
No, but that's the benefit. I say that because that's the benefit of working in a larger firm. They put an ad at the top if you type in my name for that reason. Yeah, it's Mitch_Harris2 is both Instagram and Twitter, and then LinkedIn I believe is the same. And then, like I said,
LinkedIn, they can just type in Mitch Harris and then MLB or Merrill Lynch or ML or something, and they'll find you. That's great. And I mean, look, we can talk all day about the financial side of things, and we will in our next the next time we do this. But listen, I really appreciate your time today, Mitch. You're just another example of why the importance of being ready for that transition and really taking advantage of it is so important. And this is something that you and I have spoken offline about, how critical it is to be providing this to the current athletes today, but also the retired athletes who are many of them who are unfortunately struggling quite a bit. So we'll be jumping into that conversation also down the road. But thanks again for being on the Make Your Mark live webinar series. This is great. This is all part of the Win Again Academy. Thanks for being on. Much more coming with Mitch, and check out the website markmoyer.com anytime for not just more information about this episode, but also the replay, and it'll be on YouTube as well. And there you go. Thanks so much for being on board, Mitch.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
All right, all the best. Talk soon.
All right.